Welcome, everyone, to another amazing episode of the 100% podcast, where, yes, you are 100% effed up and still simultaneously 100% lovable. And nothing that you have done or that has been done to you ever diminishes how truly lovable you are. I am your host, Chaya Garcia. Epic love expert, here to help you get the relationships you want instead of the to epic. And on today's show, I am so pumped. We have the amazing Victoria Baker. Victoria
Hey there.
Baker is an author of 8 books, a multi-business entrepreneur, and the founder of Housewife Cleaners and the Village Cleaning Group, two thriving companies known for empowering families, communities, and cleaning professionals across Missouri. And her core message is that you can start with nothing, survive everything, and still
Mhm.
rise to build a life with strength, purpose, and possibility. So thank you so much, Victoria, for being here.
Thank you for having me too, Haya.
My pleasure. So let's just dive right in. Unfortunately, you are in an unhealthy relationship that did not give you the love and life that you deserved at that time. So when you got there and you finally left, what was one of the worst stories where you're like, holy
Mm.
shit, this is my life. I can't believe my life got here, but I can't actually continue this way.
Honestly, today is the 5-year anniversary of me leaving that relationship, and it was probably one of the most impactful days because I finally had called the police. I decided to speak up about the abuse that had been going on in the home and put my foot down and do something about it. Um, And it was a very scary day. There was a lot going on between triangulation with my kids, physical abuse that had gone down. Unfortunately, my kids had witnessed some of it, and it was just a very scary time in general. So, where do you want me to really start with that?
How did the day begin that day? Where
Unfortunately, very early. Um, so I was definitely living with a narcissistic husband at the time. We had decided to split up. We were already in the process of separating and divorce, but we still cohabitated. It was still one of those situations. And I'd woken up to go to the bathroom and start the day like any other. And he was just kind of odd and off and on one and followed me around asking me a bunch of questions. And I knew the day was going to go downhill from there. So typically, when I feel like I'm being made into a prey and someone's following me around, I just know that that's not going to be a good day. And that was one of his big tells. It was a big red flag for the day. From there, arguments spurred, things happened physically back and forth. We were kept in the home for a little bit. Unfortunately, it got more physical from there in front of my kiddos, and then I had to leave the house and call the cops. They came and didn't really do as much as I had hoped for. It was a sad situation where they were more able to be, I guess, conned by my ex. It was a really sad situation where he was given like a half pack of smokes, a pat on the back. I'm so sorry you went through this. She's so crazy. Kind of one of those days. And then the rest of the day, very tense because we had like a 12-hour watch with our county police where they were going to come back and put one of us in jail, and it was most likely going to be me and removing the kids from the house. So there was a lot going on that I had to like really keep track of timelines and the safety of my kiddos. My kids were very young at that point. You got to meet my youngest just a few minutes ago, but at that point, 5 years ago, I had another little one about the same age. And so I had really tiny children to look after, and there was a lot of violence in the house, and he had a gun. And thankfully, we were able to get out of there around 11 p.m. So almost the entire day had to go by. But later that evening, we were able to get out of there, and I was able to couch surf for a couple of weeks with my kiddos, and we got our situation figured out. And from that foundation of pain, we were able to rebuild everything to where we are today.
yeah. So
Mhm.
so shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
He's hitting you. You're
Hmm.
panicked. You eventually call the cops. The cops
Yeah.
come, and he blames you, and you're now the victim because he's, like, probably so good at charming people and being, being the victim. And so then you have a watch. So at after 12 hours, does he get taken to jail?
No, as the cop put it when he was there, they were going to watch our household for 12 hours. And if we were to call again for another domestic violence charge, I would be the one that was taken to jail because I had unnecessarily called them in the first place. They couldn't substantiate the call. And because they also interviewed my 5-year-old at the time, and he said that nothing had happened. He had been in the house with his dad for about an hour and a half at that point without me getting coached. And because he had said nothing had happened and they couldn't substantiate the claim, they said, call again within the next 12 hours and we'll take you into custody. And then we'll probably put the kids in foster care while we iron this out. And that's a terrifying thing for a mother to hear because
It's
all the
horrible.
horror stories you hear in foster care, I've grown up knowing people in foster care, and it's the last place you want your children to be. So that was definitely a top priority, was trying to figure out how to stabilize the situation and go back to the status quo for the 12 hours that we had, or figure out a better plan of leaving because what we were doing wasn't working. And at that point, it was so unsafe. We needed to go, especially with the physical violence having escalated to the point of it being in front of the kiddos. And I mean, they were almost involved in the altercation because of their proximity. That's not something that I ever wanted to have happen, and I couldn't imagine it was happening right then.
Yeah, I mean, so what happened at after the after the 11 hours that you left? What
Yeah.
were you what were you thinking? What were you feeling? Were
Well,
you afraid that would come after you?
yeah. There was just sheer panic because I was still in the mindset of being under his thumb. Truly. I hadn't really, I guess, felt my power yet, as you might say. I wasn't feeling my strength. So everything was just a hair trigger away from causing an avalanche to happen again. And it would be my fault. So I was constantly on red alert. I was trying to be very careful about everything that I did and say. He was being very, very strange the whole time because he kind of enjoyed that twisted uncomfortableness in the house. Um, and after the 12 hours was up, thankfully, he went to bed thinking that everything went back to normal. Yeah, we had a big day, but we'll have another one tomorrow probably. It's no different than any other time. And so when he felt that normalcy returned, it was kind of that one space of time I could just kind of pack the kids in the car and drive off. And I did. Carefully had a backpack full of all the kids' clothes, like just a handful of outfits for each of them and their shoes. And I put that in the trunk of the car. And then once he was asleep, once everybody was asleep, I just couldn't. I had to stay awake. I couldn't sleep. And I remember sneaking out of the bed and having to like really carefully pull the covers back and everything and get dressed in the dark. And I remember I left clothes like stashed in the kitchen and a cabinet he never went in because, it was all my baking stuff. And I took my shoes out and got dressed really quietly. And then I remember carrying out one sleeping kid after another. And I had 3 children. So it was really scary because I was like, man, which one do I take first? Who might make noise? Who can I ask to run if, he wakes up in the middle of this? And so my heart was thumping the whole time. The adrenaline was just going. And then I wasn't entirely sure where we were going to head to after we actually did get out of the house. I had an idea. I didn't have a confirmation. So it was also really scary about, well, where do we land? Where do we go from here? I'd never been homeless. I'd never couch surfed, never with children, especially. And I felt really like overwhelmed. Head was under the water. There was just too much going on.
And how long have you been with him at this point?
At that point, it was 6 years. And because I had recently delivered our third child together, he pulled them from daycare. He made sure I stayed home. So there was really nobody around me, very isolating, no income, nothing. Like, I had my company created and I had a team that was out there handling appointments. Not the best, but they were making it happen still. But everything was so virtual to the point where I was just signing a check once a week and he would take it into the office. I wasn't allowed to leave. So it was six years in, but very intense at that point. And it was a slippery slope to get to that point for sure.
And what were like, first of all, that's crazy that, it took 6 years of abuse, of trauma, of all of the horrible things that he did. And I
Yeah.
think it's important to make note of that because when I get on these calls, they're
Hmm.
6 years, they're 10 years, they're 8 years, they're 30 years.
Yeah.
And, staying in these relationships, even though they start off obviously not for the best, it takes so long and so much abuse to actually
Yeah.
leave it. So, what were some of the signs that you saw when you first dated him that fast forward 6 years later, you're like, shit, I wish I would have paid more emotional attention to that?
There were so many of them. So I actually met him 14 years before. So we knew each other for 7 years, then we were together for 7 years. And in high school, when we first met, he had a really bad reputation. He was kind of creepy. He made me feel weird because he would do this information out of reach kind of thing. He would hold information just out of reach and then he would provide it. For
Can you give an
example,
example? Yeah.
yeah, for example, the first day I met him, I was in line at the lunch line at school, and he just shows up behind me and goes, "Hello, Victoria." He knew my name. I didn't know him, knew nothing about this dude. And it took about 2 weeks before I learned his name because he refused to give it to me. He just constantly kept the information out of reach. And whenever I would go to try to ask, mutual people around us his name, he would throw a red herring, change direction of the conversation, control the conversation. And I didn't get that information for about 2 weeks. So things like that were just from the get go, immediately we were like, oh, what's that? But it was so, I didn't understand it as a red flag at that point, and nobody around me was really protecting me in that sense. But even 7 years later, when we were adults and got together, I instantly saw that he had a manipulative kind of mindset, very big on triangulation and playing on my emotions. Certain things would be brought up, and he knew he could press buttons, and he would hit those buttons whenever things weren't going his way. I'd ask him about if he was going to get a job because he moved into my house and didn't have a job, and I needed him to have some kind of also income, and it turned into something completely different about how he's depressed that he doesn't see his daughter enough, even though he didn't want custody of her. It was a very strange kind of bait and switch constantly that I had to keep up with. And it took a while to rise above and see the pattern of this behavior and recognize those red flags. And I definitely had to go out and educate myself. It wasn't something I just figured out on my own. I went out and I had to read books, to have conversations. YouTube was a very big help, obviously. Podcasts like this are immensely helpful. And that's the only way I was able to identify those red flags.
Yeah, I mean, those red flags really do show up date number one, day number one. And so, we're like, what I want to also bring light to is what kind of emotional state were you in that
Hmm.
you attracted and even allowed someone to screw with
Hmm.
you so badly?
I definitely know that having healed so much, I've looked for validation in all the wrong places before. I grew up with a narcissist, so I kind of already had a bit of a softened, um, I guess, approach to narcissistic people. But how do I put this? I guess because I was so ready to be seen, he could see that and was like, nobody ever sees her the way that she wants to be seen. She comes up in a big family. Okay, this one I could easily pull away from the rest of the herd. And because they give you that kind of attention, that love bombing in the first place that really validates you, makes you feel like you are special,
What did he say?
or goodness, all kinds of things. I mean, when I was reconnecting with him 7 years later and we got into our relationship, he had kind of spun this tale of notoriety, I guess. I was sensei's daughter. My dad was, an instructor for martial arts, and he had taken one of his classes at one point, and so I became sensei's daughter as a nickname. And I guess, it was kind of one of those things where I was the one that got away because we had moved states before he could really seal the deal on a relationship, dating me in high school. So he kind of stayed connected to me and would pop up periodically. And there was just kind of this constant, hey, this is Sensei's daughter. She got away, but here she is again. And he was just ready to clamp down on that. So he built that up around me as well. When he talked to his mom, he told me that it had healed his relationship with his mom that he was talking with me again. So it really hit that vibe for me because I have a bad relationship with my mother. He's like, "Oh, you healed mine," you know? And those kinds of things, make you feel better about yourself and make you feel good, and definitely made me feel good at that time. Of course, I didn't realize the damage that would come with also having his mom in the picture. But those sorts of things were where it started out to really make me feel like this was the right path. Divine fate was a big one. We crossed paths at just the right moment. All kinds of things like that. I could just feel it in the air that across time and space, your heart was calling to mine, kind of things. And I definitely, I fell for it.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy because, after however many conversations I've had, they're all so similar. And again, I've had so many of these, and every time I'm like, how are they so similar?
Yeah.
Like you can literally read a book about what a narcissist does. And if you're not educated, you can't see the signs because they're so subtle. And like what you were saying, you were in a really broken state. Like you came from a narcissistic mom who really made you confused and have low self esteem and didn't
Mhm.
have the love and the consistency that you deserved. And then you have this man who kind of matches where your emotional state is and continues that confusion and continues that push
Mhm.
and pull. And then at the same time, not only almost in made you like inhuman in the sense that you were Sensei's daughter. Like he didn't even see you. He saw you as a character that he created for you. And then that
Mhm.
character was so beneficial. Like you're healing my relationship with this. I never thought I can love again like I have with you. I had a bad ex, but now that you're in my life, now I can heal. And you're like, "Oh, I'm so glad I'm being used
Yep.
for good."
Mhm. It made me feel like I was just the Band-Aid to everything, and I
Yeah.
was bringing stability. It was the "I can heal him" energy coming to life that just it was an illusion, a complete illusion, and my mom had opened the door to that with the way that she had also brought me up narcissistically. So, that happens with a lot of kids, and I feel like that is a huge thing that's overlooked too. I mean, people don't look back and say, "Where did all this begin?"
Yeah, and I mean, I think that is a really important message of saying, "Where am I at right now?" Because if a woman I mean, again, I'm sure there's men who listen to this podcast as well, but my intention is primarily for women. So, um, for women, you need to ask yourself right now, like I needed to ask myself, you need to ask yourself, like, how much do I love myself? Because if we're not in a state of believing that we're 100% lovable, we will
Mhm.
attract someone who will fill that gap and then be like, well, I will love you and I
Mhm.
will want you and I will see you. Except that only a really effing crazy person will want to fill that controlling, dominant role.
Yeah, and I ask myself that a lot because reflecting on a daily basis is the one way to keep yourself from attracting those people. Constantly doing that tending of your garden. And as a mother, I want to make sure that I'm looking out all around me so I'm not putting those people in their lives and the garden can continue to prosper generationally. That's a big thing with millennials as well. We're all trying to fix things generationally.
Yeah, it's so, so true. So just to like go into the story, what were some of the things when he first hit you or first berated you or first like did before the shit storm where you actually left, all the mini shit storms before that,
Mhm.
you had kids with him, you felt the pain, you felt the fear, you got hurt physically, emotionally. Like, what did you tell yourself? Because you had 3 kids. So what did you tell
Yeah.
yourself that made you stay? Like, let's say he hit you one night and you're like, "Holy fucking
Yeah.
shit," but then you were like, you stayed anyways. What was all of that
Yeah.
internal speech that you said to yourself why it was okay to stay?
I heard a lot of his voice in my head telling me, "You can't make it as a single parent. You're gonna fail. These kids are gonna go hungry. You'll live under a bridge." And all my worst fears started just pouring in, like one after another. You'll live in your car, but then the car is gonna break down. And that neurotic spiral would just constantly hit. And I guess because I was already in that heightened fight or flight state, it was so easy for that flood to happen. And I wasn't really equipped at that point to just deep breathe through it and like really pull out the facts of the matter. And it took me a long time before the facts really did support me enough to feel like I could pull myself out of those spirals. But I remember in the beginning, especially, it was about 6 months in that I found out I was expecting our first child, and that's when it really began to get bad for the first time, but it wasn't physical quite yet in a full, like, hitting me kind of sense. It was just kind of everything was leading up to that point, so I was like, "Oh my god, I've barely been able to take care of myself," and then he moved in with me, and then I couldn't take care of the both of us, so we had to move over closer to my parents, and, everything that all the facts that I could pull negatively were there to support that I was not gonna be able to do this without him. Um, but I couldn't get there on my own for a while, but I could, and that I didn't need him.
So you told yourself, "I need him. I can't handle this alone. I'll never
Yeah,
make it." And his voice of, "You're a loser. You won't be able to make it," was sort of also in the forefront.
always, yes. And every baby made that more and more challenging, obviously.
Yeah. And so what was like one of the areas where you started to have some awareness? Like, what did you do or how did you allow yourself to get some more strength? I mean, obviously, it was a shitstorm at the end, and sometimes you just need
Mhm,
so much pain to
mhm.
see a little bit more clearly. But the
Yeah,
purpose of the podcast is for women not to get to the shit show
yes.
so that they could hear it in advance. So, like, what would you say was some of the helpful thoughts that you now know or that you could implement to have left the situation beforehand?
I definitely had to name my facts, like I said. At that point, I didn't realize, I was pulling all the weight. I could do it all on my own. He was just one extra plate I was having to tackle. I mean, I was the income, he was staying home. Childcare, I had the opportunity to have, government assistance to get them into daycares. And at some point, I had done that. And that was eventually something I did to get out of the situation I was in again. And it just was going down the checklist of what do I need to do to be successful on the other side without him? What would it look like? And starting to ask those sorts of questions.
Just like breaking it down. And I know that like a lot of women, when they're thinking about leaving their narcissistic or abusive partner, are so scared
Yeah,
because they're afraid that he might get custody of the small children,
absolutely.
and they stay just out of sheer fear and like
Hmm.
protection of the child, even though most of the time women can get sole custody and be safe. So what was
Yeah.
that process for you like?
That was probably the most terrifying, nerve-wracking experience, I would say, of all of it. The 6 years of living through it were almost nothing in comparison to the divorce because it always goes out with a bang. He didn't really care about the kids. I wanna, like, put that at the forefront. He didn't care about the kids, didn't try to go for custody per se because he wanted custody, but definitely wanted to mess with me. So he didn't ask his lawyers about how the kids are doing or if they needed anything. He never paid any child support, but was definitely trying to tug a war for that 50-50 custody. Obviously didn't know the shoe sizes, things like that. I was in a unique position that when we first left in the middle of the night like that, I was instructed to file an ex parte, which is a restraining order, an emergency restraining order. And because one of my children was struck in the face during our altercation, I was able to file one on behalf of the children as well. And that gave us a lot of leverage to kind of keep space in between him and the children, especially given his history of abusing them in the past. I don't want to get obviously into too much detail, but there was a very steady history of him abusing our oldest child. And our second one was at the age where it had began. So I was really like scared and wanting to get her away from the situation before it could begin. And I was finding material that was making me very uncomfortable about his preference for a certain age group. So I didn't want my kids anywhere near him anymore. I was finding out so much about him. When I finally was, not as scared to dive in and figure out who I was dealing with finally. But then exposing that was really scary because I mean, even when he came back inside from the day when I called the cops on him, he looked me directly in the eyes and said, I did not do XYZ. You're just crazy. And he outlined exactly what he had done. So I knew that I was up against someone who was really, really sick and really scary. So beyond that, when we got back into the house, we were allowed to, of course, take back the house with our emergency restraining order. It was upside down. He had drilled holes in the walls. We had a cop come through and take cameras out of the walls. It was a really scary time. We didn't have Wi-Fi for about 6 months because I was just too scared of having Wi-Fi around the house. But we did eventually have to get it because we got cameras on the house. He had been breaking in continuously, had taken my hard drive out of my computer at one point. So there was like a lot going on during the divorce. And I always felt like I was just a minute away from being a statistic. I mean, even when he moved out and had to move into a new place because of the restraining order, he moved in with someone that he had been shacking up with already. And someone dead wound up on his front lawn like 2 weeks later. And they're still investigating it. And it was just like perfect timing. Everything was matching up. And my friends were like, that was almost you. Like, you were so close. We were always wondering if you were going to be on the news next.
It was a
So,
female who was no longer alive on the lawn?
I'm sorry, what?
With a person who was no longer alive on the lawn, was it a female?
Yes, it was a 17-year-old girl. And that was really scary because he had just moved in with another woman with young kids. And I was like, oh my God, history is just repeating itself. And what can you do, Especially when you're already going through the divorce process and you're doing everything that you can do.
Yeah, I mean, I really just wanna give you kudos for being brave enough to go to court and leave to get custody of your children. I know that that is one of the scariest,
Mhm.
processes for a mom to
Yeah.
actually leave because she thinks she might need to stay to protect the little ones if he gets 50-50. But like I've
That was the
said.
biggest thing. Yeah.
What?
That was the biggest thing. Yeah.
But like I said, for the women listening, it's very likely you will get custody of your children, and you have to protect your life. I mean, it's not worth them witnessing, like, it's not better that they witness so much abuse than even the fears that you're imagining, which will hopefully not come true.
Yeah.
So, I just wanna give you credit for going through that and going through the fear and the terror of leaving a man and not knowing what was gonna happen, but thankfully,
Mhm.
you were strong enough to go through the courts and get sole custody of your kids.
Mhm.
And so for yeah, no, you go.
Yeah, it definitely took a playing ball and going along with what the courts wanted. Eventually, they saw exactly what I saw, and it was just a matter of waiting that part out. It was scary, but it was definitely worth it, and I felt like if I wasn't going to stand up to him, this was just going to be something that continued to happen over and over again. Somebody needed to stand up finally.
Yeah. I mean, and again, you just giving you kudos for having that strength because it really takes like a courageous spirit to maneuver that and to go through your fear instead of under it.
My kids were definitely worth it, and their happiness. I couldn't imagine raising them in that environment, seeing how it was breaking me down and seeing how it was changing my oldest child. I mean, he's still changed. We're still going through therapy. He's on medication to manage a lot of things now, and these things didn't have to happen. And I can see my next child, my second one, she is so bubbly, she is such a social butterfly. It's like they're night and day. And I know that can happen with kids just normally in general, but you can truly tell it's the anxiety and those kinds of things that influence my son, my oldest, the most that have changed his personality from what he was. He was just as bubbly as my daughter is. And so we're still trying to get back to that point where he can feel the safety to be himself again like that. And he's 10 now. So, I mean, we've gone over half his lifetime with being away from this relationship, and it's still a work in progress. But if we stayed there, it would have been way worse. So I'm happy to see that this is a much better environment for him, and he's a lot more happy. He's thriving. So just doing amazing. But he wouldn't have if we stayed put.
Yeah, I mean, that time is really of import because when you're in it, time can get blurred and so much time can elapse. What would you say to women now listening if they're like in an abusive relationship, they're frightened to leave, their one kid is getting picked on? Again, I don't know why these patterns are almost identical per hundreds of stories, but the abuser picks a child to abuse as well, and then sometimes they have a favorite child where they don't bother. Um, but for the women listening and for the men listening, what would you say to them if they're confused, if this unhealthy relationship where they're always wrong and crazy might be worth leaving?
I would say on the extreme end of it, ask yourself, do you want this to be the last tantrum that you deal with that comes from an adult who should be at the same level of being where you're at emotionally? Calm, able to respond without blowing up. And on the other end of it, what does your dream life look like? And does this fit that? Do you think that your dream life still might be out there if you were to just strip away this toxicity? And it makes you start to think about things and to add things up and to take time to reflect a little bit more each day. And I think that's important. That's that wedge that breaks open the door from hopelessness to saying, you know what, I've got a daydream out there. You might have taken away everything that makes me happy in the here and now in my present, but I still have something up here I can go dream about. And ideas are strong, they manifest. So,
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it's so important for women to get back their identity of really who am I? And even when you're healthily married, it's like still who am I in relation to all the wonderful people in my life? And, for me, like I really had to work on loving myself completely and not realizing that I needed approval from other people or having other people be proud of me. And I realized that the guilt that we hold on to, like, maybe it was you never getting love from your mom or, whatever your specific holding on to guilt or pain was. People attract that wound in other partners and they say, well, if I can subconsciously get you, who reminds me so much of my fucked up childhood and my mother and my dad or whatever, if I
mhm.
can get you to love me, maybe I'll be lovable. And we have this like power inside of us that craves and desires and like needs almost like oxygen to be loved. But conversely, it's not taught that it's self-generated. It's self-generated between you and God and no one else, whether you're in an abusive marriage or an amazing marriage, it's still self-generated.
Mhm,
And, um, I think it's important to educate people that the percentage that you don't believe that you're lovable is that percentage that you will allow abuse to come in from other people. So if you believe you're like 50% lovable, but 100% fucked up, and if people really knew what you've gone through or what you've done, like, they wouldn't truly love you. That's how much abuse, that 50% is how much abuse in your experiences and your identity in your life that you will attract and allow to occur. But only a woman or a man with high self-esteem will be like, "You can't hurt me. I love me already, and therefore I'm going to protect me." But that protection piece is very much missed if we don't believe we're lovable first.
mhm. Yeah, you definitely have to be able to own your energy, and it takes taking a step back and looking at the big picture too, because it's all those details you say that make you feel like you're unlovable. This happened or this happened. But if you take a step back, all those things are what create you in the here and now and your success story. I mean, you've had to have a rock bottom, you had to have somewhere where you stumbled and fell to then rise and have your success story. And that's how I try to look at things is that you have a foundation, a rock bottom, and you can just build from there.
Yeah, and so now how have you been able to build? I saw that you had a man helping you with your little new baby, so are you married now? He's your partner, I think you said.
Yes,
Um,
we work together too. He's been helping me build the next phase of Housewife Queeners as we've branched it into the Village Queening group as well. And that's been just fantastic as we bring more people into the fold and are able to touch more lives and help more people into, I guess, greater stability, both with their livelihoods and with their sense of community.
yeah, and how's your transition been? Because you went for so long in a marriage that was so toxic and really made you feel less than and confused and crazy, and what was that bridge? What was that timeline or that journey that you had that allowed you to feel safe enough to now be with your current partner, to trust him, to have another baby with him? Like, what was
Thank you.
that bridge like for you?
It was a wild ride, and I'm gonna say dating is not for the weak-spirited. I'm glad I'm out of that forest because it's more of a jungle. And it took a lot. It was exciting to find myself again. That was something I didn't expect. I didn't have much of an identity after I'd been stripped bare and made to just be a breadwinner and mother for so long. Um, and I mean, I was still doing those pieces, but I was able to balance so much better. On the other side of things, I was like, wow, my house is staying clean. I'm making dinner on time, and it's whatever I want. It's not like a fight to choose what's going to be for dinner. And I ended up with a clean house and extra time at the end of every day to spend looking into who I am and developing what I wanted with my life, the dreams I wanted to go out and approach and get involved in. And ultimately, I still wanted a father figure for my kids. And that meant working on myself a lot, but then going out and trying to find him. And thankfully, as you saw, my partner, he is really good with my kiddo. My oldest, my son, who had a really tough time with his dad, they click really well. So I was very blessed to find him and have that relationship come into the fold. And he's been an expert addition to our family and helping out with my oldest, kind of reframing how to view men, and they've got a really good relationship as a result. Not only that, but now there's our next little baby, and we've got 5 kids total now because he's got 1 and I've got my 3, and then we just had this little one. So the family's been growing.
I love that, and, I like that you said that it's really like a jungle out there. I'm a dating coach and a relationship expert. The majority of my clients are,
Mhm.
single. Single women are the women that I work with, and, it's important for women to understand you don't marry or date, you don't marry what you want, you marry who you are. And I just need to
Mhm.
say that again. You don't marry
Yes.
what you want, you marry who you are. So you don't even need to worry about the insanity that exists out there, which definitely there's so much
Mhm.
insanity. And there's
So
a
much.
lot of narcissists and addicts and porn addicts and disgusting men and people with low self-esteem and pain and trauma. But if you love yourself, which is the name
Mhm.
of the podcast, if you believe you're 100% fucked up, right? Definitely went through your traumas. You accept yourself, you accept your
Mhm.
flaws, you accept your past, and you believe that you're still 100% lovable and you don't need someone to prove that or earn that or want you or save you or see you, then you actually can just attract someone who doesn't have a need for you. And
Mhm.
if you're in need, then they're gonna also need you, but it's a very, very sick dance. So, especially for the dating woman, like, don't be in need. Love yourself, protect yourself, make yourself happy. You don't need a man to make you happy. They can amplify your life. I'm in an extraordinary marriage. They definitely make life a lot better when you're in an amazing marriage, but at the same time, if I didn't know how to love myself, my marriage still wouldn't be amazing. And so it's important to believe that you're lovable so that you don't allow someone who can love up on you in a way where they have the control and you become the possession.
Mhm. Yeah. I would definitely say that was the thing that changed dating for me. It went from trying to make myself look like I am good enough to be worthy of being dated to, I'm tired of this. You got to add to my piece because I take care of my household, I take care of my family. I'm tired. I take care of myself. Okay. I'm taking care of all this. I got things just the way they are. So I'm asking for you to be a part of things to enhance things because I want to go have fun now. You and me, let's create a relationship. And I want you to accept that I don't like pickles on my sandwich. You can like pickles. I don't like pickles. And that shouldn't be a big deal. And everything that goes into who I am is just another pickle analogy. I had this happen. You didn't have this happen. Well, this is what makes me me. And once you do accept that, it makes it a lot easier, and it made sifting through, I guess, the fish in the sea a lot easier until I found RJ.
Yeah, and it's a really powerful thing that you said that they need to enhance my life. And that's what I say to my clients, like, if they are not inspiring you, that's
Mhm.
it. Like, you that just don't even try to entertain it because there's so many, but everyone's fucked up and everyone has trauma and I understand and I should be compassionate. And I'm like, no, you can understand and be compassionate when he's across the world from you. You don't have to bring him into your house and your bedroom and your life. Meaning, just because we can understand why someone's fucked up doesn't mean that that makes their fucked up behavior acceptable. Doesn't
Mhm.
mean that we have to attract or allow or navigate or live with their unhealthy behavior.
Mhm.
And another highlight is that you said, like, I at the beginning of your dating needed to feel like like I'm worthy enough to be dated, like I'm worthy enough to be chosen. And I think a lot of women go through that even when they're married and when they're abusive relationship, when they're single.
Mhm.
It's like, am I truly worthy of somebody
Mhm.
wanting me? But if you can believe that you're 100% fucked up and 100% lovable, then you're like, you know what? I am 100% lovable. I am worthy. I actually don't need someone because I accept all of me. The pickles are not pickles, but I accept all of me, everything
Mhm.
I'm great at, everything that I'm not good at. And I still feel like, not that I'm a great catch and someone would be happy to be with me, but I allow the flaws not to define me
Mhm.
because then I don't need to prove that I'm good. And so,
Okay.
share a little bit now as we wrap up this beautiful podcast episode. Where can people find you?
So I have social media all over right now. Housewife Cleaners has been blooming, and we've taken to Instagram and TikTok as of recently this last month. But we can be found on Facebook. I also have a website, housecleanersnearus.org. But I have a Facebook page for my writing for all of my different businesses, and of course my actual Facebook for my business profile that can be followed.
Amazing. And what's one last message that you would like to leave for the listeners if they are either single and how to avoid someone who could love bomb them, make them feel so special and so unique and so divine. And the synchronicity is my mother's name was Jane Doe, and your mother's name was Jane Doe, and my kid was killed by a DUI, and
Mhm.
your child was killed by a DUI. We're destined for each other. And they both self destruct next to each other. And so these synchronicities and this divinity where I see in toxic relationships,
Mhm.
what would you say as one of your closing messages to all the women, whether they're in or out of a relationship, on how to believe that they're fucked up, like own and accept yourself, all of you, and still believe that you're 100% lovable?
Don't believe in coincidences and turn on that Miley Cyrus Flowers song, because
How does that go?
I can buy myself flowers. Because if they start love bombing you, just turn that on and it will pull you back to reality that you can also do that for yourself. They have to substantially show up. They can't just show up with, nice favors and a lot of pretty words. They have to show actionable, presence and walk the walk. Okay. It takes time, but about 3 months and somebody's mask will slip and you'll know.
Yeah, and I
But
actually
don't believe
have
in coincidences.
don't believe it. I mean, yeah, divinity is when you're calm and you're relaxed and you're connected to how great the world is. It's not when you're waiting for the next shoe to drop just to hold on to the good times.
Mhm.
So, thank you so much, Victoria, for being here. Guys, if you want to find Victoria, I will have all of her show notes linked below. I am Chaya Garcia, your host, Epic Love Expert, here for you to get the relationships to go from to epic. You can find me on my socials at Epic Love Expert. Thank you for being here. And you are 100% fucked up and still simultaneously 100% lovable. And nothing that you have done and nothing that has been done to you ever diminishes not even 1% of how truly lovable you are. So, I will see you on the next episode. Take care.